close. And he is the president, the new president of the United Way of Erie County. Welcome back. Good to see you.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Alrighty. So, sometimes we catch up with you guys, let's say a nonprofit partnership day, the Keystone or, something in June. But this is an important conversation to have right now as we start the new year and get a handle on your new leadership, number one, but number two, the extent and the power of the impact of the community schools. And so, first off, let's have you tell your story, Mike.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a Erie native. Was raised here. Went to school here, and like a lot of folks, was a kind of a boomeranger. So
okay,
I left for about 10 years for really school and some other experiences. So went to school in South Carolina, but also through some scholarship programs to Australia. I found my way to the Peace Corps in North Africa, and kind of worked my way back to Erie. Never really was planning on it, but when an opportunity came up to work at local United Way, I kind of realized that some of the things that I was interested in doing nationally or internationally rather, we needed some help and support in my own community. And so took that opportunity and really never looked back. So I've been with United Way for the last 15 years.
Wow. When you think about growing up in Erie, again, we kind of get stuck in our strata. I went to 16 years of Catholic school, and again, I grew up I grew up on 18th Street, so I had some knowledge about people that were poorer. But it's hard to connect with poor people that have less means. Were you aware of what was going on in our community as you were coming up, you think?
So I really don't think so. I mean, looking back, it was really some external experiences when I left Erie, and some of the opportunities and experiences that I had at that time. It really helped me reflect and recognize that kind of the blinders that I had growing up were just that, and that the needs that I had seen in other communities really existed here in Erie for quite some time, including when I was growing up. And so it was really a conscious decision to come back here and to focus on this type of work, because I personally feel everyone deserves an opportunity to be successful, and there are barriers for a lot of people that are beyond their control. And so leveling that playing field has been really important to me, and United Way has really been an opportunity, a key opportunity to do that here in Erie County.
That whole idea of crushing poverty, right? I mean,
yeah, there's a lot of need out there, but there's also, through data and through strategy, there are effective ways that we can help lift people up. And, this is a long-term generational approach. We're not looking at kind of a quick fix here, but there are things that we can do and other communities can do to kind of level set and allow people the opportunity to kind of break that cycle.
What was your undergrad major? What was your degree?
Yeah, so I majored in English and then minored in global studies.
Oh, cool.
And it was really the global studies that took me through some fellowship programs. So, for example, I did an internship at the U.S. mission to the UN in New York. So I was kind of working out of the UN. I was also in Europe for a summer with a lobbying firm at the European Parliament. So I had sort of that governmental and intergovernmental perspective, and that's kind of where I saw myself for a period of time. But as I had shared earlier, I kind of refocused and reconnected with Erie, and a lot of that development work that I was interested in doing could apply that here, and it's an even more meaningful experience to be able to help support at sort of a systems level here in Erie than it would have been in another community or another country even.
Do you think that government, can be like a strong partner in meeting some of these goals that the United Way has set out? I mean,
yeah, we're realistic about kind of working at the
the local, state, and federal level. But this last year in 2025 and now going into 2026, it's the first time that United Way has had a public policy agenda. Where
cool.
we've convened, a panel of, or council rather, of volunteers to identify realistic scope and, what are those policy priorities that would have a direct impact on our work, and that's primarily community schools. And so, we're realistic in terms of what are some actionable things that our local elected officials or state elected officials could get behind that would have a meaningful impact here in Erie. And, we do take advantage of state grants, and we just concluded a 5-year federal grant directly aligned with our work. So, it's all from our perspective, we try and braid funding and support as long as it's appropriate and it's aligned with our mission to make, to make it all work.
I love that concept of braiding, of like intermingling, like the three three-threaded strand, right? All right, so United Way has had quite a history, right? Go over a little bit of that history, because wasn't it the United Fund, or you're talking a million years ago, right?
Yeah. I mean, our United Way is, I don't have the exact number, but I think it's about 115 years old. It's one of the older United Ways in the country, and for the bulk of that time, we were set up really as most United Ways were initially conceived, which was sort of a transactional organization where we would, once a year over a period of time, raise as much money as we could, and then through a thoughtful allocation process, distribute that out to local nonprofits, kind of to reduce the burden from those nonprofits to have to do that work so they could focus more on their mission. So, all those years ago, there were 18 nonprofits in Erie County when United Way was established, and that made a whole lot of sense. As the years moved on, there was more and more need, but then also more organizations. And it was about, it was in 2012 when our board went through some strategic planning and recognized that, we really need to shift our model to be more impactful at a systemic level, because we were looking at some community level indicators such as poverty, and the needle wasn't moving. In fact, it was moving in the wrong direction, and it wasn't a value statement on any of the organizations or programs that we were funding. It was just recognizing that we needed to be more strategic with a very limited amount of funding that we were able to raise, because we weren't providing the lion's share of funding for any program anymore. And
it's kind of like sprinkling it around.
Yeah, we kind of thought of it as it's like spreading peanut butter. It's a little bit goes a long way, but it wasn't having, like I said, when we're looking at systemic issues in our community and the opportunity that United Way could have to have a really meaningful impact, we needed to do something different. And so that was a multi-year process, and it was a difficult process because it meant changes in funding structure for local organizations. It meant restructuring our organization completely. It meant having difficult conversations, but those were the things that our board and staff felt were absolutely necessary to maximize the potential of the resources that United Way had. And so that sort of started that process of opening our funding to more organizations, but then refocusing it to be much more specific, and transitioning from that kind of that pass-through organization to a social impact organization. So instead of funding other organizations or other programs, now we're leading initiatives, and we're funding the things that need to be funded to make those initiatives work, such as community schools.
Do you think that people need to really remember, if you're talking about something like 2011, think about what had just happened. Hammer Mill closed, Steris closed. I mean, basically, the big employers were going away.
Yeah, and that had a huge impact, not only in terms of the need in the community, because a lot of those workers needed additional supports or transitionary to get to different programs or different employers, but it meant a huge impact on how United Way raised money. There was a lot of support through those historic manufacturing companies. And so what I mentioned earlier, sort of a braided funding model, the and it's still a critical part of our budget, are the everyday donations and the payroll deductions. Like, we can't survive without that support. But we had to, because of the changing dynamic in our community, think about, what grants can we write to support our work? How can we work with local businesses to be thoughtful in terms of, partnerships for our different schools? And so we've been very thoughtful in terms of which grants we go after or how we align that funding, but we recognize that we had to work completely differently on that fundraising side too, for United Way to continue to be successful and to continue supporting the community.
Mike Jaruszewicz is with us here. We're going to take our first break and get into this conversation about community schools, which is the foundational impact of this social impact agency. Stay with us. 417 Talk Erie. Talk about the United Way and community schools with Mike Jaruszewicz with us. He's the new president of the United Way. And I want to get into the origin of the community schools model because, again, you're looking at the metrics and saying, we're trying to move some things from the systems not working. How many different metrics do we have? We have vital signs. We have this. We have that. We're looking at trying to move the needle from not having the poorest zip code in America and not having what was the designation of African American children having the worst poverty levels in America. I mean, what a distinction. I mean, that's not anything we would ever want to be, the worst.
No.
So what came around with the community schools? Where did that come from?
Yeah, so as we were kind of going through that multi-year process that I described before of kind of redefining our impact strategy, we did a lot of research. We were looking at best practices in other communities, what other United Ways were doing. We were looking for sort of transitioning from what you could think of as like isolated impact of, funding different programs or initiatives across the spectrum to ways that we can work to partner and align those organizations on a common goal. And so it's not just about collaboration, it's about really a term called collective impact, where we can identify a shared priority, we can make sure that lines of communication open, we can have shared metrics, but there's also an organization that's sort of like the quarterback for all of that, or like the conductor for an orchestra. And we were seeing how United Ways and other communities were kind of serving that role for these large community-wide initiatives. As we were learning more about those, we started to hear more and more about community schools. And community schools is a collective impact strategy that's very adaptable to different communities, even within a county like Erie, where there's cities, suburban, rural, like it can be applied in all those different scenarios. And so we started having conversations with other communities. We visited a few community school communities and saw this as something that could really have an impact here. And so our board approved a pilot in 2015 for the upcoming school year, and that really started the process. And then once we started the community school pilot and we saw its impact, it didn't take long for us to start reorganizing the rest of our organization and resources to really focus on that and expand. So the United Way of today, the United Erie County of today, is really focused on community schools. We still have the Imagination Library, which is the free book program for kids birth to age 5. We also support the Operations for 2-on-1, which is a helpline, a free, confidential, 24/7, 365 helpline. But the vast amount of our human and financial resources are going to support community schools.
What is it essentially that a community school does? Because I think it's an important point to make that some of the things that the community school director and the community school organization does had been done by teachers, but it's stretching.
Sure.
The teachers are stretching the building principle. And now we've got a system and a plan instead of kind of being ad hoc of taking care of this need or that need. But talk about essentially what the schools and the director does.
Yeah, so community schools, our primary focus is to remove non-academic barriers to learning so students can be successful in school. So we use a data-driven process to identify from the student's perspective, from the teachers, and from the parents' perspective, what are those things that are preventing students from being successful? So you noted like teachers, have in the past kind of worn the hat of a social worker, or worn the hat of a doctor, or worn the hat of a mental health specialist or counselor. What we do is we identify what those needs are, and then we work within our community to find resources and partnerships and bring those into the school, transforming it into really a hub of resources, primarily for students, but also for families. So in essence, that's what we do at community schools. We organize community resources to remove non-academic barriers to learning so students can succeed in school.
So what are community schools not? What is the misconceptions about what community schools are supposed to do or what have you?
Yeah, so community schools, it's not a program. It's not like an add-on. It's a rethinking of how education is delivered in a school. And so this is very much a way of working and thinking, this collaboration where we're having a shared leadership model where we can look at data and needs and then adjust how we're all working to support student success. It's also community school directors, they're United Way staff that work pretty much full-time in school buildings. They're connectors. They're not necessarily, well, they're not the case manager, they're not the counselor, they're not the tutor. They're the ones that are working to find the right partnerships and bring those into the school. So I think those are two of the larger kind of misconceptions with community schools. So
who are some of the folks that would work with a community school? I'm thinking about for resources. Let's say are you working with Second Harvest or the local food pantry that's in the neighborhood? How does that work, for example, for food, for example?
Yeah, and this work would not happen without community partners. I mean, our role of kind of aligning it's really in response to the mission alignment with these other organizations. It's, their mission is to serve the same folks that we are. What we're trying to do is kind of make that a more efficient and direct process by bringing it into the school. So yeah, Second Harvest, behavioral health providers, basic need providers, after school program providers, physical health, like vision or dental, like those are all those non-academic barriers where we're working through a partnership agreement process to figure out, where's the best place to plug them in and for which students and for how long. And so that's all part of the process. But yeah, we've dozens of impact partners that are critical to the success of any community school.
When you think about it, though, you go to a middle school, you've got hundreds of children there, especially in the city. How is one director able? I know, like at Erie High, we're talking about 4 directors, but how does one director do this at an elementary or middle school, for example?
Yeah, so it's all part of that. When I mention it's not a program, it's a strategy, or it's, we're not just an add-on in the school. We work very collaboratively with each of our school district partners, where when we build out and we're looking at the data and build out the strategies. That's
right. That's that first year, right? Once you designate a school, you don't do anything except for data gathering, right?
Yeah. This isn't guesswork. We're like I said, we're doing surveys and focus groups with students, with their families. We look at the data that schools collect, the quantitative data, and we're working collaboratively with our school district partners to determine what those strategies are going to be. And it's that process where we figure out where those collaborations take place, because there are going to be instances where community school director takes the lead on implementing a project or implementing a strategy. In other instances, they're going to be supporting the school team that's kind of already set up to do that work, but there's a missing piece for whatever reason, and so the community school director is going to help by providing that missing piece. So it's a very, again, thoughtful process, and we're not putting it all kind of on the back of community school directors. It's very much a deep partnership with each of our school districts.
I have less than a minute, but I want to ask you where this has been going now for close to 10 years. Yeah. Are you starting to see the academic metrics come around as you impact the non-academic barriers?
Yeah, so it looks different in each of our school district partnerships, but we are in some cases seeing that, because what we are able to do is remove those non-academic barriers. So we have regular tracking and reporting that shows, we're increasing the number of students accessing after school programs, increasing the number of students accessing basic needs, increasing the number of students accessing physical and mental health supports. And so those are the things, those are the metrics that we're really looking at, because if we can do that, then school districts can focus on the academic instruction. And so everything needs to, but that's kind of where we're at. Yep.
We got Mike from the United Way. Stay with us. News is next, and we'll be back more of how businesses are getting involved in advancing the community school strategy. It's Talk Erie and the Joel Natale Show. You're tuned to Talk Erie and the Joel Natale Show. Live, local, and award-winning from our perch here at 5th and State, having the crucial conversations. Today we're talking to Mike Jaruszewicz. He is the president of the United Way of Erie County. We're getting our arms around the community schools model and some of the other things that the United Way is doing as a social impact organization. And Mike, I want to talk about how you have been developing business partners and community partners to make this community schools model sing, really. And I've been to multiple openings of community schools, and one, I think it was it Grover Cleveland, or I can't remember where I was, but it was Bankers, right? So there were 5 banks that were underwriting a community school. Union City was the women's organization, different organization. I think Wabtec has Edison, right? Talk about how businesses get plugged in.
Yeah. So when we were thinking about the sort of the sustainability model for community schools, we recognized that businesses were going to be a key part of that, and also recognized the interconnection between what community schools are doing and what businesses need, because in many ways community schools is a workforce development initiative. We want to make sure that students are graduating from school with all the skills that they need to be successful in our local workforce. And so when we've had conversations with local businesses and business owners or leadership teams, they see that connection and want to help, and they want to get involved. And it's not just about a financial contribution. That's obviously critical to making this happen, but there's so much more that corporate partners bring to that partnership and vice versa. So for example, there's a lot of volunteer work that happens where we're able to really thoughtfully connect volunteers from that local business to what we're trying to accomplish in the community school. A good example are some clubs or after-school programs. You mentioned, Wabtec. We have STEM-based after-school programming where for years Wabtec volunteers have been coming to that school and leading that work. Those hopefully are going to be future employees at Wabtec, and you can kind of replicate that across all of our different corporate partnerships. Also, in-kind donations have been critical. So, when we know that there's a business that's interested, we have conversations with them to see what the best fit would be in terms of a school, if there is one, or if we can, align support broadly across multiple schools. But it's been a really impactful partnership, both because it's helped with the sustainability with the schools, but also it's brought so much more.
If you're a family with a child in one of the community schools, and you're just kind of like, kind of overwhelmed right now. What should they ask for? What could be we're talking about basic needs. We're talking about mental health needs. We're talking about what else? You mentioned vision and dental and so on. You should just talk to the director to see what's available, right? I mean.
Yeah, we see directors sort of as like an entry point. Like I mentioned before, they're not going to be the ones that are going to be doing the support work directly, but they have the understanding of who the right fit or right person or organization is within the school. We try and reduce stigma at community schools, and so it doesn't. We don't want students or families to feel like it's a handout by any means. We really just want their children to be successful. So, but trust is also important. And so directors work really hard to kind of build that trust with families. So when they are in a challenging situation and could need some additional help, they feel comfortable talking to them, and then directors can do a warm handoff to, it might be the case manager in a school, or it might be the nurse, or it might be to the SAP team. But a lot of times it's hard to make that first step to ask for help. So when someone does, we work really hard to make sure that it's a kind of a safe space to do that, and that we can quickly connect them to a resource.
Does the referral sometimes come from the teacher where they're saying they're seeing this child's kind of struggling? Maybe they're falling asleep in class. I mean,
So in Pennsylvania, school districts have what are called SAP teams. So teachers are often making.
what does that stand for?
It's a student assistance program.
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah, so it's where, if there is a student that might be struggling in class and, might think that there's something else going on, it's a structure for schools to kind of pull a team together to talk through what that could look like. And what community schools has brought value is there's now a whole array of additional services that a SAP team could potentially leverage to allow that student or family to benefit from. But sometimes it's students will come up to the community school director and just mention something, and we'll discreetly help them and connect them to the right support in the school. It's really multiple points of entry to help students and families.
Is there sometimes gathering meetings or larger information meetings and so on? How does that work?
And that's part of the strategy too. Is it's really like whole school support. So we kind of look at it in different tiers. Like, what are things that could benefit all the students? What are things that could benefit like a subset of the students? And then very acute or very specific strategies for students. So there's a lot of all school opportunities that we coordinate that help improve things like family engagement, helps improve connections to the community. It improves access to resources. So there's a lot of family events. It might be like a family game night, but at that family game night, there's also resources. There's also other staff that can, help support one-on-one with families in different ways. So there's a lot of kind of thought behind how we're presenting resources, so it comes across as something that's available to everyone, but then also, very specifically for other students.
All right, well, let's get our arms around the extent of where the community schools model has been, put out in Erie County. Because at one point there was a discussion that, every school in Erie County could be a community school.
So, that's our long-term vision. We know that community schools work, and we unfortunately know that a lot of schools could benefit from this model because it is so adaptable based on the needs. We're obviously limited in terms of resources and capacity, but that's really where we're focused. We need to make sure that we're sustaining our existing partnerships. I mentioned that braiding funding model. It's individual donations are critical to our support. That corporate support is vital as well. We're looking at external grants, and we need those things just to keep our existing 17 school partnerships going.
So there's 17 right now.
In 4 school districts.
In 4 districts.
Yep.
Okay.
So Erie's public schools, we're in all the elementary, middle, and Erie High School. In Iroquois School District, we're at the elementary school. Girard School District, the elementary school, and Union City Area School District at the elementary school there. So, we want to be able to scale up those county partnerships to support middle and high school students in the future. And then we also want to expand to other school districts that see this model as bringing value to their students.
Talk about Erie High, because obviously at scale, it's like having 4 schools, right?
Yeah. Erie High School, it was a very thoughtful kind of process to follow. Normally what we do is we'll hire a community school director collaboratively with a school principal and their team, and then do a needs assessment, and then kind of figure out the strategies and what we're going to do in that specific school. With Erie High, because there's 2,300 kids in that school. There's a whole section that's career and technical. There's a whole other section that's sort of the traditional education. There's cyber students that are connected into that school. There's a lot of different nuances, and it's 4.5 city blocks, the campus itself. So, we knew from the outset, like, one community school director is not going to be able to kind of manage all of this. But instead of just hiring 4, what we did was our data team, we have a whole data department, 4 professional staff that work with our school district partners to do those needs assessments and help develop the strategies. They did a 9-month data collection process where they interfaced with 1,200 unduplicated stakeholders, students, parents, community members, teachers. And based on that needs assessment, that helped us identify really the position descriptions for the community school directors there. So they're each sort of doing different things, but work collaboratively as a team. And so far, it's been very successful in helping remove some of those barriers, bring additional resources into the school, because we're in our second full year there.
Wow. And I mean, basically, does that mean that all of the Erie schools are covered except for like collegiate?
Yeah, except collegiate and Emerson Gridley.
Okay.
But the vast majority of students, K through 12, are going to access and benefit from the community school model.
Okay. Oh, that's right. Emerson Gridley is that's a separate type of school as well. Are things like the parent teacher organization? How do other folks interface? That are part of the orbit of a local neighborhood school.
Yeah, and you kind of mentioned it before. Like, there's other things that have already been in place. Like, when we start a community school, we do an asset inventory. We look at what are all the great things that are already happening in the schools, and we don't want to disrupt anything that's working really well. We want to support it. We want to align with it. And so where those parent teacher organizations existed, where there had been clubs and after school programs that worked really well, or other community partnerships, our intent is to, if this is great, that's how can we support you? There have been some instances where there's been a program or a club or an organization that maybe was focused on something that we found wasn't a top priority, so we've worked with them to kind of realign to better support. But existing parent and teacher organizations, we've worked as collaboratively as possible with them to really lift up what they were doing and then do more of it.
When you talk, again, you've got data teams, and it sounds like there's a huge data approach to this. So everybody's going to want to know, okay, how are we doing? How are we moving the needle? We've got some data from the schools that have been in the process for a while. Is it fair to look at at the community schools when we're looking at educational outcomes, or that's not really fair?
So that's our ultimate goal is student academic success. So that's what we want to see. But when we look at community schools in our non-academic work, what our data structure is based around is 4 pillars and 10 goals. So those are all the things that we're able to really focus in on the strategies. And if we're successful in doing those things and schools are able to teach and educate, that's where the interconnection is.
What are the 4 pillars?
Yep.
We've got time here.
Yeah. So we've got community and neighborhood partnerships. We've got positive environment for wellness and learning, expanded learning times and enrichment opportunities, and authentic family engagement. It's a little shift at the high school level, but that's where we can help support access to enrichment programs or access to family and neighborhood supports, those physical health barriers, improving school culture. Those are all the things that schools need support with, so teachers can teach and building principals can lead. And so, like I said, we are starting to see where the two are intersecting and students are growing academically and they're growing proficiently. It's something that nationally, when researchers have looked at community schools, that interconnection between strong academic instruction is not going to do the job if they don't have the barrier removal.
Right. That's
where United Way comes in.
In the remainder time that we have, let's talk about 2026 and the future.
Yeah.
Again, you mentioned 17 schools in 4 districts. Do you have a growth strategy for the next 3 to 5 years?
So, when we launch, yes. When we think about launching a community school, we prioritize at the elementary level.
That makes a lot of sense.
Because again, this is a long-term strategy. We're not going to see significant shifts in academic proficiency even over the course of several years. We're talking about a generational approach here. Because of the long-standing barriers and embedded in our community. So we want to start at the elementary school, then ideally scale up to the middle and the high school within a school district. So we've been successful there in Erie City. We need to provide some additional support in those other 3 county partnerships. United Way as an organization is going to be going through some strategic planning this year, which will help, I think, with more specifics of what that could all look like. But that's we've always been clear that that's really our model: is start at the elementary, scale up to the middle and the high school, and then obviously that's as resources permit, and then we would start looking at other school districts where we can provide support. But there's a lot to launching and maintaining and sustaining a community school. It's not just about the financial resources, it's about the staff, and not just community school directors. Like we talked about the data team. We have programmatic support. We have other experts on our staff that are needed to help make sure that all those things in the background are happening, so community school directors can remove those academic barriers, and then so teachers can do their part of the education.
As you grow as an organization, what kinds of things are you doing to build capacity as United Way? Again, because let's face it, we're still dealing with these macroeconomic issues, population loss, lack of job creation and so on. That's got to impact organizations like you, right?
Yeah, and that it kind of gets back to those public-private partnerships with employers. It kind of ties back into our public policy agenda and some of the larger relationships that we're building with, like the chamber, the MBA, with our elected officials to really figure out, because community schools and United Way aren't going to do it all. We're aligning partnerships where we can, but what is the piece that we can do? And kind of to your question, I think it goes back to that workforce development piece and making sure that we understand at the broader community level what those gaps are, what those needs are, so we can support our education partners. And maybe it's some of those soft skills, or maybe it's the career exploration. We're already exposing youth to viable local careers at the elementary level. We're being even more thoughtful and strategic at the middle school level, like designing some clubs around STEM programs, or things that students could really sign up to take on when they get into Erie High School.
And you're at the table with conversations like Erie Together and career pathways and all that stuff. I mean, you guys are involved in that larger community conversation, right? I mean,
yeah, United Way's long been involved in a lot of those conversations, because like you said before, there's there's things happening all over the place in Erie, right? So
the alphabet soup, we like to say.
we've always tried to be accessible and present at all of those, and really what our job is and my job is to kind of filter all that down into how can we be very focused with our resources and align those supports and those partnerships to really meet the outcomes that we're meeting.
Is there a place where people can get more information? Again, just explaining the community schools,
Yep.
explaining what you guys are all about.
Yeah, best place is our website, unitedwayerie.org, but follow us on social media too, particularly Facebook. We get a lot of posts out there so people can actually see the things that are happening in the community schools. But we also have a good blog post on our website too, so you can, like, the things that we're talking about, you can visually kind of see what it looks like, and even hear from some of the students and families themselves about the impact.
Beautiful. Mike Jaruszewicz, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Congratulations
Yes,
on your
thank you.
elevation to the presidency, and we're glad that you're here. Don't be a stranger, okay?
Much appreciated. Thanks for the time.
You got it here. More ahead on Talk Erie.